My mother sold me for $200,000 and a bottle of bourbon. The apartment smelled like cigarette smoke, cheap liquor, and rain leaking through cracked window frames when I heard the knock. Not a normal knock. Heavy. Controlled. The kind that made the walls shake and every bad memory in your body sit up at once. I froze halfway through taking off my waitress apron, my fingers still sticky from carrying cherry Coke and barbecue sauce trays for 9 straight hours at Miller's Diner in Brooklyn. Outside, thunder rolled across the city like distant gunfire. My mother looked up from the kitchen table so fast her wine glass tipped over. Red liquid spread across the unpaid bills in front of her like blood in a crime scene. "Clara," she whispered, and I knew immediately something was wrong. Really wrong. Vanessa Bennett had spent my entire life making disasters look temporary. Evictions. Gambling debts. Men who screamed too loud and stayed too long. But I had never seen fear on her face before that night. Another knock hit the door. Slower this time. More patient. Like whoever stood outside already owned the place. My stomach tightened. "Mom," I said carefully, dropping my purse onto the couch. "Who's here?" She didn't answer. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, and her hands shook so badly she couldn't pick up her cigarette. Then the lock clicked. I stared at the door in confusion. We never locked it properly because the deadbolt had been broken for 6 months. But someone unlocked it from the outside anyway. The door opened slowly. 3 men stepped inside wearing dark tailored coats spotted with rain. The first 2 looked like bodyguards straight out of a movie. Broad shoulders. Expressionless faces. Earpieces hidden beneath close-cropped hair. Dangerous in the quietest possible way. But the third man was the one who stole the air from the room. He was tall. Maybe 6'3". Dark charcoal overcoat. Black gloves. Silver watch catching the dim kitchen light. He didn't move like other people. He moved like someone completely certain the world would make room for him. His gray eyes swept across the apartment once before landing on my mother. And suddenly Vanessa Bennett looked very small. "Mrs. Bennett," he said calmly. His voice was low. Smooth. Controlled. "You missed another payment." My mother stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "Mr. Moretti, please," she said, her voice cracking apart. "I just need more time." Moretti. The name hit me immediately. Everyone in Brooklyn knew that name even if nobody said it too loudly. Damian Moretti. Real estate empire. Nightclubs. Rumors wrapped in expensive suits and silence. Men like him didn't walk into apartments like ours unless something terrible had already happened. Rain hammered against the windows harder now. Damien stepped farther inside, removing one black leather glove finger by finger. "You've had 6 months, he said quietly. 6 months of extensions. 6 months of excuses." I looked at my mother. "Mom, what is he talking about?" Her eyes filled with tears instantly, and somehow that scared me more than the men standing in our apartment. "Clara," she whispered again. "Baby, I didn't have a choice." My chest tightened painfully. Damien finally looked at me directly then. Not the quick glance men usually gave waitresses. Not hungry. Not cruel. Just observant. Calculating. His gaze moved to the fading bruise near my wrist where my sweater sleeve had slipped down. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Then my mother said the words that changed my life forever. "Take her instead." The room went completely silent. Even the storm outside suddenly felt far away. I stared at her, certain I had heard wrong. "What?" My voice barely came out. Vanessa stepped toward Damien desperately, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "She's smart. She works hard. She'll do anything you ask. Please. Just clear the debt." My ears started ringing. I couldn't breathe correctly. Couldn't process what she was saying. My own mother stood there bargaining with me like I was furniture she could pawn before rent was due. One of the bodyguards shifted awkwardly beside the door. Damien Moretti didn't move at all. For 3 long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Damien slowly turned his head toward my mother, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She's your daughter," he said quietly. Vanessa broke into sobs. "Please." Damien's jaw tightened once. Barely noticeable. But suddenly every man in the room looked nervous except him. And that was the moment I realized Damien Moretti hadn't come to buy me. He came for something else entirely. My mother kept crying like tears could erase what she had just done. I stood frozen beside the stained couch, my pulse hammering so hard it hurt behind my ribs while rain rattled the windows above us. Damien Moretti did not raise his voice. Somehow that made everything worse. Quiet men were always the dangerous ones. Vanessa reached for his arm with trembling hands. "Please," she whispered again. "I will do anything." Damien looked down at her hand, touching his sleeve like he found it mildly offensive. Then he stepped back. "Clearly," he said coldly. The shame on my mother's face lasted less than a second before desperation swallowed it whole again. "You do not understand," she rushed out. "They were going to come after me. After her. I ran out of options." "You ran out of morals," Damien replied. One of the bodyguards near the door looked away awkwardly. I wrapped my arms around myself because suddenly the apartment felt freezing. "What debt?" I asked quietly. Nobody answered me. My voice cracked harder the second time. "What debt, Mom?" Vanessa finally looked at me, and for the first time in years, she actually looked guilty. Not drunk. Not defensive. Guilty. "I borrowed money," she whispered. "How much?" Silence. Damien answered instead. $200,000. My knees nearly gave out. "What?" I stared at my mother in disbelief. How does a waitress and a bartender owe $200,000? Vanessa wiped at her tears frantically. "I was going to pay it back. At Atlantic City casinos." I snapped before I could stop myself. Her face told me everything. I felt sick. Truly sick. Every extra shift I had worked. Every bill I had covered. Every semester I delayed nursing school because rent came first. None of it mattered because she had buried us anyway. Damien adjusted the cuff of his black glove with calm precision. "You also borrowed from people far less patient than me," he said. "People who do not care whether your daughter survives your mistakes." My stomach twisted violently. "What does that mean?" He looked at me directly then, and I hated how steady his eyes were compared to the panic crashing through mine. "It means another group offered to buy your debt yesterday." The word "buy" made my skin crawl. Vanessa started sobbing harder. "I was trying to protect you," she cried toward me. "You tried to sell me." The apartment went silent again except for the rain. Damien's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Enough," he said. One word. Soft. Controlled. Every person in the room immediately stopped moving. I had never seen power like that before. Not loud power. Not angry power. Real power. The kind that did not need permission to exist. Damien pulled something from inside his coat pocket and tossed it onto the kitchen table. A folder slid across the unpaid bills. Photos spilled out. Men standing outside my diner. Another picture of me leaving school 2 nights ago. My blood turned cold. "Those men work for Viktor Sokolov," Damien said evenly. "He intended to use your mother's debt differently." I stared at the photographs with shaking hands. "Why are they following me?" "Because your mother already promised you to them once." My entire body stopped functioning for a second. I slowly turned toward Vanessa. You what? She covered her mouth with both hands, collapsing into tears. I could not hear anything after that. My ears rang too loudly. The room tilted slightly beneath my feet. Damien watched me carefully, not cold anymore. Calculating. Measuring whether I was about to break apart completely. Get your coat, he said quietly. I blinked at him. What? You are leaving with me tonight. Fear shot through me instantly. No, Clara, he said calmly, if you stay here, they will come for you before sunrise. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the apartment in harsh white light for half a second. Damien Moretti stood perfectly still in the middle of our ruined kitchen, looking less like a criminal and more like the only solid thing left in my collapsing world. And somehow that terrified me most of all. The hallway outside our apartment smelled like wet concrete and old cigarettes as I shoved random clothes into a backpack with shaking hands. My fingers barely worked correctly. Toothbrush. Phone charger. Hoodie. Jeans. I moved automatically because my brain could not fully process what was happening. 20 minutes ago I had been worried about tuition payments and whether the subway would flood again from the storm. Now a mafia boss stood in our kitchen while my mother cried over the fact she had apparently promised me to dangerous men. My entire life had tilted sideways too fast to catch. Behind me, Vanessa kept begging. Please do not take her. The hypocrisy nearly made me laugh. Bitter. Exhausted. Broken laughter trapped in my chest. Damien stood near the front window, one hand in his coat pocket while rain streaked across the glass behind him. He looked completely untouched by the chaos around him. Like storms naturally bent around men like him instead of hitting them directly. You offered her 10 minutes ago, he said calmly. I was scared. You should have been. His voice never rose above normal conversation, but my mother flinched anyway. I zipped my bag harder than necessary. I am not going with him. The words came out stronger than I felt. Damien turned toward me slowly. You are. You cannot force me. One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. Miss Bennet, if I intended to force you, this conversation would already be over. The terrifying part was that I believed him instantly. I hated that. Lightning flashed outside again, briefly illuminating the expensive silver watch at his wrist. Everything about Damien Moretti looked expensive. Controlled. Tailored. Meanwhile I stood there in non-slip diner shoes and a faded sweatshirt with mascara smudged under my eyes from crying. The contrast made me feel painfully exposed. Clara. My mother's voice cracked apart behind me. Please listen to him. I stared at her in disbelief. Now you want me to trust him? Tears streamed down her face. You do not understand these people. Damien's expression changed slightly then. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Careful, he said softly. The room immediately went still again. Even Vanessa stopped breathing for a second. I had never seen anyone command silence without effort before. Damien looked at me instead. The men looking for you are not businessmen pretending to be criminals. His gaze flicked briefly toward the photographs on the table. They traffic girls through ports in New Jersey and Miami. Young women disappear every year because people owe the wrong debts. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might actually throw up. Stop, I whispered. I am telling you the truth. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Why do you even care? For the first time since he entered the apartment, Damien hesitated. Just slightly. His gray eyes settled on the bruise near my wrist again before lifting back to my face. Because somebody should. The answer hit harder than shouting would have. My throat tightened painfully. Nobody had said something like that to me in a very long time. Not since my father died when I was 16 and everything in our family slowly collapsed afterward. Vanessa suddenly grabbed my hand. Baby, I am sorry. Her nails dug into my skin desperately. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I looked down at her trembling fingers holding mine. This woman had packed my school lunches. Braided my hair before middle school dances. Stayed awake sewing Halloween costumes because we could not afford store-bought ones. And somehow she had still become someone capable of trading me away to survive. I gently pulled my hand free. I cannot do this right now. Her face crumpled instantly. Damien moved toward the door. We need to leave. What happens to her? I asked quietly. Damien paused. My people will settle her remaining debt. I blinked in shock. You are just letting her go? No, his expression darkened slightly. I am making certain she never gambles with your life again. The rain outside intensified, hammering the fire escape hard enough to sound like metal drums. One of the bodyguards opened the apartment door. Cold air rushed inside immediately. I looked around the tiny apartment one last time. The peeling wallpaper. The broken kitchen light. The couch where I used to sleep during thunderstorms as a kid because the roof leaked onto my bed. Home had never felt safe. But leaving it with Damien Moretti still felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. Then he held out his hand toward me. Not demanding. Not impatient. Just waiting. Clara, he said quietly. Come with me before someone worse does. And against every survival instinct I had left, I took his hand. The black SUV waiting outside our apartment looked like something built for presidents or criminals powerful enough to become one. Rain slid across the glossy paint beneath the streetlights while the engine purred softly against the curb. One of Damien's men held the back door open for me without speaking. Everything about them was silent. Efficient. Controlled. Like they had practiced disappearing into shadows long before tonight. I stood frozen on the sidewalk clutching my backpack against my chest while cold rain soaked through my sneakers. Upstairs, the kitchen light in our apartment still glowed weakly through the cracked blinds. My mother was up there crying while I climbed into a stranger's car because she had gambled away our lives. The thought hollowed something out inside me. Miss Bennett. Damien's voice came from beside me. Calm as always. You are shivering. I looked over at him. Rain clung to the dark strands of hair near his forehead, softening him slightly in a way that almost looked human. Almost. I am not getting into a car with you. One of the bodyguards shifted subtly at my words, but Damien only slipped his gloves off slowly. You already took my hand upstairs. That was different. No, he said quietly. It was not. I hated how steady he stayed while my entire world kept collapsing around me. Lightning flashed across the street, illuminating puddles scattered over broken sidewalks and rusted fire escapes. Brooklyn looked exhausted at 2 in the morning. Like the city itself wanted sleep but could never quite reach it. Damien opened the SUV door wider. Warm air drifted out carrying the faint scent of leather and cedar. Expensive. Clean. Nothing like the cigarette smoke permanently trapped inside my apartment walls. You can either sit inside. Willingly, he said evenly, or stand in the rain while men who traffic women search for you. Fear twisted through my stomach again at the reminder. I climbed inside before pride could stop me. The door closed softly behind me, sealing out the storm almost completely. The inside of the SUV looked less like a vehicle and more like a private lounge. Black leather seats. Soft lighting built into the ceiling. Bottled water lined neatly beside a digital screen glowing faintly near the center console. I suddenly became painfully aware of my wet diner uniform and cheap backpack sitting in the middle of all this luxury. Damien slid into the seat across from me a second later. The bodyguards took the front. The SUV pulled smoothly away from the curb without another word. I watched our apartment building disappear behind streaks of rain on the tinted windows. Where are we going? I asked quietly. My house. The answer came too fast. Too simple. Absolutely not. Damien looked up from his phone. You would prefer a hotel? I would prefer my life back. Something flickered across his face then. Not irritation. Something heavier. So would most people. The car fell silent again except for rain tapping softly against the windows. Manhattan slowly appeared ahead of us through the storm, glowing gold and silver against the darkness like another universe entirely. Skyscrapers pierced low clouds while headlights reflected across flooded streets below. I had lived 23 years less than 10 miles away from this world and still felt completely outside it. Damien noticed me staring. First time seeing the city like this? Usually I see it from subway platforms and diner windows. His gaze lingered on me for a moment too long. That will change. I laughed quietly before I could stop myself. Bitter. Tired laughter. You really think I am just going to stay with you? No, he said calmly. I think you are smart enough to survive. The answer caught me off guard. Most men only notice things about me they wanted. Pretty enough. Quiet enough. Easy enough. Damien Moretti looked at me like I was a problem he intended to solve instead. I still could not decide whether that was comforting or terrifying. The SUV turned beneath a private underground entrance guarded by black gates and security cameras. My pulse instantly sped up again. Men in suits stepped aside the second they saw our vehicle approach. Nobody checked Damien. Nobody questioned him. The gates simply opened. Power. Real power. The kind that moved entire worlds without noise. I swallowed hard as the car disappeared underground. And for the first time that night, I realized there might not be any easy way back out. The elevator ride to Damien Moretti's penthouse was so quiet it made my heartbeat sound loud inside my own head. 43 floors climbed in complete silence while soft instrumental music played through hidden speakers overhead. I stood near the back corner clutching my backpack tightly against my chest like it could somehow protect me from this entire night. Damien stood beside me with one hand in his coat pocket, calm as a statue while Manhattan lights flickered across the polished steel walls around us. Not nervous. Not tired. Men like him probably never allowed themselves either. The elevator finally opened directly into a private hallway lined with dark marble floors and warm amber lighting. No front desk. No neighbors. Just silence and expensive architecture stretching around us like something from an interior design magazine. I stepped out slowly, my soaked sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. This is your house? I asked before I could stop myself. Damien glanced back at me. One of them. Of course it was. The answer should not have surprised me, but somehow it still did. A man opened the double doors ahead before Damien even reached them. Older. Gray suit. Kind eyes hidden behind thin glasses. Unlike the bodyguards downstairs, this man looked at me with concern instead of suspicion. Good evening, sir, he said calmly. Then his gaze shifted toward me. Miss Bennett. Damien handed him his coat. This is Arthur. He manages the household. Household. The word sounded absurdly formal compared to the cramped apartment I had left behind an hour ago. Arthur gave me a small nod. You must be freezing. I will prepare the guest suite. Guest. Suite. Not room. Suite. I followed Damien inside and nearly forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan glittering beneath the storm like an ocean of gold lights. The living room alone looked larger than my entire apartment building. Dark wood floors. Black marble fireplace. Shelves lined with leather-bound books. Everything sharp. Elegant. Controlled. Nothing felt accidental here. It felt like Damien himself had designed every inch of the place to reveal absolutely nothing personal. I stood awkwardly near the entrance while water dripped from my sleeves onto a rug probably worth more than my yearly rent. "You can sit down," Damien said quietly. "I would rather stand." One corner of his mouth almost moved. "Almost. You have been glaring at me for 20 minutes straight. It would be more comfortable from the couch." Heat rose instantly into my face. "You kidnapped me. I protected you. That is not the same thing." Damien loosened the cufflinks at his wrists slowly. "Tonight it is." I hated how easily he answered everything. Like he had already calculated every possible argument before I even spoke. Arthur returned carrying a folded towel and set it gently beside me. "The guest bathroom is ready, Miss Bennet." "Thank you," I said automatically. Damien noticed immediately. "You still say thank you when you are terrified." I crossed my arms tighter. I was raised correctly before life got weird. Something unreadable flickered briefly in his eyes. Then his phone buzzed. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly when he looked at the screen. Not fear. Not panic. Focus. Sharp and immediate. Damien answered quietly in Italian, his voice low enough that I only caught fragments. "Names. Numbers." The word Sokolov again. I watched his expression harden slightly as whoever spoke continued. "No," Damien finally said calmly. "She stays here." My stomach tightened at the word "she stays here." Like my future had just been decided in another language without my permission. Damien ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "You should sleep." I laughed softly in disbelief. "You think I can sleep after tonight?" "No," he admitted. "But exhaustion makes people careless." He stepped closer then, not threateningly, but enough for me to catch the faint scent of cedar and rain lingering on his clothes. Up close, Damien looked less untouchable somehow. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes. A thin scar near his jawline almost hidden beneath the low light. Tiny signs that even men built like fortresses still carried damage somewhere underneath. "Nobody will touch you here, Clara," he said quietly. "I give you my word." I should not have believed him. Everything about this situation screamed not to trust the dangerous stranger who controlled entire rooms with silence alone. But standing there soaked from rain and betrayal with nowhere else left to go, Damien Moretti's promise felt safer than anything I had known in years. I did not sleep. I tried. Arthur led me down a hallway larger than my entire apartment and showed me a guest suite that looked like something from a luxury hotel. Soft cream walls. A king-sized bed untouched enough to belong in a magazine. Towels folded perfectly beside a marble bathroom sink bigger than my kitchen counter back home. Everything smelled faintly like lavender and expensive detergent instead of stale smoke and leaking pipes. I stood there for a full minute just staring because my brain could not process that people actually lived like this. Then I locked the bedroom door 3 times anyway. Old habits. Fear habits. I showered until the water turned cold, trying to wash the night off my skin. My mother's tears. The photographs. Damien's voice saying she stays here like my life had become part of his responsibility overnight. By 3 in the morning I still sat awake near the massive windows wearing borrowed sweatpants Arthur somehow found in my size. Manhattan stretched endlessly beneath me, glowing through the storm like a different planet entirely. I wrapped my arms around my knees and tried not to think about how quickly someone's entire life could collapse. Around 4:30, I heard music. Soft piano drifting faintly through the quiet penthouse. I frowned and opened the bedroom door carefully. The hallway lights were dimmed low, casting golden shadows across dark floors. The music came from farther down the corridor. Slow. Familiar somehow. Curiosity pulled harder than caution for once. I followed the sound quietly until I reached another room partially lit by warm lamplight. Then I stopped cold. Damien sat beside an older woman near the fireplace, his massive frame relaxed in a way I had not seen before tonight. The woman looked maybe late 60s with silver hair resting softly against her shoulders and a blanket tucked across her lap. Frail. Elegant. She smiled faintly while Damien adjusted the blanket more securely around her knees. "Do you remember this song?" he asked quietly. His voice sounded completely different. Softer somehow. Human. The woman looked at him with confused eyes for a moment before smiling sadly. "Your father used to play it." Damien nodded once. "I know." I stayed frozen in the hallway because this version of Damien Moretti did not match the man who terrified entire rooms with silence. He noticed me anyway. Of course he did. His gray eyes lifted toward the doorway instantly. Not startled. Just aware. Always aware. "You should be asleep," he said calmly. Heat rushed into my face like I had been caught spying. I could say the same thing. The older woman turned toward me slowly. Her expression brightened immediately. "Oh," she whispered warmly. "You brought a guest." Damien stood smoothly from his chair. "Mother, this is Clara Bennett." Something inside me tightened unexpectedly at the word mother. His mother looked at me with gentle curiosity untouched by suspicion or fear. "You are very pretty," she said kindly. "Damien never brings anyone home." I nearly choked on air. Damien looked mildly exhausted instead of embarrassed. "Mother." "What?" she asked innocently. "It is true." I looked between them in complete confusion. This was not what I expected from a man whispered about across Brooklyn like an urban legend. Not warm blankets and piano music at 4 in the morning. Damien stepped toward me quietly. "My mother has Alzheimer's," he explained. His voice lowered slightly on the last word. "Not ashamed. Just careful." Suddenly pieces clicked together in my mind. The shadows beneath. His eyes. The late-night piano. The private penthouse built like a fortress instead of a playground. This was not just power. It was responsibility too. His mother reached for his hand absent-mindedly. Damien immediately took it without hesitation. Gentle. Automatic. Like he had done it 1,000 times before. The sight hit something painful in my chest because I could not remember the last time someone had held my hand like that without needing something from me first. Damien glanced toward me again. "You are safe here, Clara." The words landed differently this time. Less like a command. More like a promise he had already decided to keep whether I trusted him or not. And standing there in the quiet glow of his penthouse while rain tapped softly against windows overlooking Manhattan, I realized the most dangerous thing about Damien Moretti was not his power. It was the fact he still knew how to care. By sunrise, I still had not decided whether Damien Moretti was saving me or quietly trapping me inside a prettier cage. The city outside his windows glowed pale silver beneath low clouds while Manhattan slowly woke beneath us. Somewhere down below, taxis honked and people rushed toward coffee shops and subway stations like normal life still existed. Mine felt permanently broken. I sat curled into one corner of the massive kitchen wearing borrowed clothes while Arthur placed a cup of coffee in front of me with grandfatherly patience. Real coffee. Not the burnt diner sludge I survived on during double shifts. "You should eat something," he said kindly. I stared down at the untouched plate of eggs and toast. "I think my nervous system gave up around midnight." Arthur almost smiled. "That tends to happen around Mr. Moretti at first." At first? Then people realize he is far kinder than his reputation. I nearly laughed at that. Kind was not usually a word attached to men rumored to control half the city through fear. Before I could answer, Damien walked into the kitchen already dressed in a charcoal suit sharp enough to belong on magazine covers. His presence changed the entire atmosphere instantly without him saying a single word. Power moved with him naturally. Arthur straightened slightly. The security guard near the hallway became more alert. Even I felt my spine tense automatically. Damien noticed the untouched food immediately. You did not eat. I am not hungry. He glanced once toward Arthur. Bring something lighter. That is not necessary, I started, but Arthur was already moving. Damien loosened his cufflinks while checking messages on his phone. You fainting from low blood sugar would complicate my morning. Your concern is touching. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Sarcasm this early usually means someone feels safer than they admit. I looked away immediately because the worst part was he might have been right. Arthur returned with fruit and tea instead. Somehow he had already learned I hated eggs when stressed. That level of attention felt strangely intimate after years of being invisible to most people. Damien sat across from me at the marble island, reviewing documents while sunlight slowly spilled across the kitchen. For a few minutes, the scene almost looked normal. Almost. Then one of his phones rang. Not the one from earlier. Another smaller black phone sitting beside him. Damien answered instantly. His expression hardened within seconds. Where? He asked sharply. The warmth vanished from the room immediately. I watched him stand slowly while whoever spoke continued rapidly through the receiver. Damien's jaw tightened. How many? Silence. Then colder silence. He looked toward me. When? My stomach twisted painfully before he even ended the call. Damien lowered the phone carefully onto the counter. Too carefully. Dangerous men became terrifying when they moved gently instead of violently. What happened? I asked quietly. He looked at me for one long second before answering. 3 men waited outside your diner this morning. My blood ran cold. What? Sokolov's people. He grabbed his suit jacket from the chair beside him. They questioned your manager about you. Fear crashed through me so fast my fingers tightened around the teacup painfully. Megan. Damien paused. Who? My coworker. Panic rose instantly in my chest. She opens mornings with me every Friday. If they scared her because of me, I stood too quickly from the stool. Damien stepped directly into my path before I even realized I was moving. You cannot go there. My friend could get hurt. And so could you. I am not hiding in this penthouse while people around me suffer because of your world. The words came out sharper than intended. Something flickered across his face then. Not anger. Guilt. Actual guilt. Clara, he said quietly, this started because of your mother's debt. Not because of me. But it follows you. The truth hung heavy between us. Damien's entire life carried danger beside it like a shadow that never fully disappeared. He looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. I already sent security to the diner. I blinked. You what? Your friend will be protected. My pulse still raced wildly, but confusion cut through the panic now too. You did that before telling me? Of course. He sounded almost surprised I would question it. You care about her. The simplicity of the answer hit unexpectedly hard. Damien protected people the way other men breathed. Quietly. Automatically. Without asking whether they deserved it first. Then his phone buzzed again. He checked the message and the entire room seemed to darken around him. What now? I whispered. Damien's gray eyes locked onto mine with chilling calm. Sokolov just sent a message. Fear crawled slowly down my spine. What kind of message? Damien slid the phone across the counter toward me. A photograph filled the screen. My apartment building. Taken less than an hour ago. Across the image, one sentence appeared in cold white text. We know where she belongs. The photograph on Damien's phone made my chest tighten so hard it physically hurt. My apartment building looked smaller somehow from a distance. Pathetic. Vulnerable. The fire escape rusted along one side. The cracked windows. The flickering neon liquor sign across the street. Home. Or whatever version of home still existed after last night. Across the image, those 5 words sat like a threat carved into stone. We know where she belongs. My fingers trembled slightly as I handed the phone back. They are talking about me like property. Damien's expression remained unreadable. That is exactly what they are doing. Rage hit harder than fear this time. Hotter. Sharper. I am not something people own. I know. The immediate certainty in his voice caught me off guard. Damien looked down at the message one final time before slipping the phone into his pocket. Arthur, he said calmly. Arthur appeared almost instantly from the hallway. I still had no idea how people moved so silently in this penthouse. Yes, sir. Double security downstairs. Nobody enters this building without my approval. Of course. Damien grabbed his coat from the counter. I have meetings. Panic flared instantly beneath my ribs. You are leaving. His eyes lifted toward mine immediately. You will be protected. That is not what I asked. The words escaped before I could stop them. Silence stretched between us for half a second. Damien seemed almost surprised by my reaction. So was I. He stepped closer slowly. Clara. His voice lowered slightly. Nobody gets to you here. You cannot promise that. I can. The terrifying part was how completely he believed it. His confidence did not sound arrogant. It sounded factual. Like gravity or winter or death. Damien Moretti simply expected the world to obey him eventually. Arthur tactfully disappeared down the hallway while tension settled heavily between us. I crossed my arms tightly. This is insane. Damien studied me quietly for a moment. You are angry. My mother sold me. Criminals are apparently hunting me. And now I am trapped in a billionaire fortress while you talk about protection like I should feel grateful. You should feel alive. The words landed harder than shouting would have. I looked away first. Manhattan shimmered outside the windows beyond him, cold and distant beneath gray morning clouds. Somewhere out there normal people worried about coffee orders and subway delays while my life had turned into something unrecognizable overnight. Damien moved toward the windows beside me. Sokolov does not lose deals gracefully, he said quietly. Especially expensive ones. So that is what I am. I snapped. An expensive deal? His gaze shifted toward me instantly. Sharp. Cold. No, the single word cut through the room. Then stop talking about me like a transaction. Something flickered in his eyes then. Frustration maybe. Not directed at me. At himself. Damien exhaled slowly through his nose before speaking again. You want honesty? That would be a nice change. He nodded once. The moment your mother offered you to men like Sokolov, your life became leverage in a war you never asked to join. My stomach tightened painfully. That does not explain why you care. Damien looked out across the city instead of answering immediately. My father built this empire believing fear solved everything. His voice stayed calm, but something darker moved underneath it now. Older. Heavier. People disappeared. Families broke apart. Innocent people paid for powerful men's mistakes. He finally looked back at me. I decided very young that I would never become that kind of man. The honesty in his expression unsettled me more than anger would have. Because suddenly Damien felt real instead of mythological. A dangerous man trying desperately not to become worse. His phone buzzed again. He checked the screen, and the air around him sharpened instantly. "What now?" I asked quietly. Damien slipped the phone away without answering immediately. Then he looked toward me with terrifying calm. "Sokolov's men just entered Brooklyn." Fear crawled slowly through my chest again. "How do you know?" "Because they want me to know." He buttoned his coat with controlled precision. "This message was not meant to scare you, Clara." His gray eyes locked onto mine. "It was meant to provoke me." "Will it work?" For the first time since I met him, Damien smiled without warmth. "Cold. Dangerous. Beautiful in the worst possible way." It already did. Then the penthouse alarms suddenly blared to life. The alarm sound cut through the penthouse like a knife. Sharp. Mechanical. Relentless. Red security lights flickered briefly along the hallway ceiling while my entire body locked in place from pure adrenaline. Arthur appeared instantly from the far corridor, calm despite the noise. "Sir," he said quickly. "Lower garage entrance." Damien did not even blink. "How many?" "2 vehicles attempted access." Damien's expression turned impossibly still. The kind of stillness that existed right before storms broke apart entire coastlines. He loosened the cuff of his suit jacket once before looking toward me. "Go upstairs." "No," the answer came out immediately. Fear still pounded through my chest, but something stronger sat underneath it now. Exhaustion maybe. Anger. I was tired of being moved around like a chess piece while powerful men decided what happened next. Damien stepped closer. "Clara. I am tired of people telling me where to stand." His jaw tightened slightly. "This is not negotiable. Neither is my life." Silence stretched between us while the alarm continued pulsing softly through the penthouse. Somewhere below us, security teams moved quickly across marble floors. I could hear distant voices through hidden communication earpieces. Controlled chaos. Damien stared at me for one long second before speaking quietly. "You think I am trying to control you? Are you not?" His gaze sharpened. "No. I am trying to keep you breathing." The honesty in his voice hit harder than panic ever could. Arthur approached carefully. "Sir, the vehicles have left." Damien did not relax. "Too easy," he murmured. Then his phone buzzed again. He answered immediately. "Speak." His expression darkened after only seconds. "What hospital?" My stomach dropped instantly. "What happened?" Damien ended the call slowly before looking at me with a calmness that terrified me more than shouting would have. "Your mother collapsed this morning." Air caught painfully in my throat. "What?" "Stress reaction," he said quickly before panic fully hit me. "She is conscious." My knees weakened anyway. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and lies and devastation, she was still my mother. Damien saw the panic flash across my face immediately. "Arthur," he said calmly, "prepare the car." "I can go alone," I said instantly. Damien looked at me like the idea itself offended him. "Not happening. You cannot follow me everywhere. Watch me." Under different circumstances, the answer might have sounded arrogant. Instead it sounded terrifyingly sincere. 20 minutes later, the black SUV moved through rainy Manhattan streets while my pulse hammered uncontrollably against my ribs. Gray skies hung low over the city, turning glass skyscrapers cold and colorless. Damien sat beside me reviewing messages while 2 security vehicles followed behind us through traffic. Everything about his world moved with military precision. "You do not have to come inside," I said quietly after several minutes. Damien did not look up from his phone. "Yes, I do." "Why?" Finally his gray eyes lifted toward mine. "Tired now." "Honest." "Because the moment you walk into that hospital, every person watching this city will know exactly where you are." Fear twisted sharply through my stomach again. You really think they would follow me there? I know they will. Rain streaked across the tinted windows while silence settled heavily between us. I stared down at my hands twisting together nervously in my lap. This is my fault, I whispered before I could stop myself. Damien's attention sharpened immediately. No, if I did not exist, none of this would be happening. Do not ever say that again. The force behind the word startled me enough to look up instantly. Damien leaned slightly closer, his expression colder than I had ever seen it. You are not responsible for what broken people choose to do. Something in my chest cracked quietly at the statement. Because nobody had ever defended me like that before. Not truly. Not without wanting something in return afterward. The SUV slowed beneath the covered entrance of a private hospital downtown. Security guards already waited near the doors. Damien stepped out first before holding one hand toward me automatically. The same steady hand I had taken the night before while my entire life burned down around me. I hesitated only half a second this time before placing my hand in his. Warm. Strong. Certain. Cameras flashed suddenly from somewhere across the street. Bright bursts of white light exploded against the rainy morning. My breath caught instantly. Reporters. Damien's entire posture changed beside me in one terrifying second. Protective. Dangerous. Absolute. His fingers tightened around mine as security moved immediately to block the cameras. But it was already too late. The city had seen us together now. And judging by the cold fury settling into Damien Moretti's eyes, so had every enemy he had.